The vaccination rollout in the U.S. is picking up speed, and in many states, restrictions are being reduced or removed completely. The temptation to let down one's guard is growing. But the coronavirus is still with us, and it is changing. A leading UK scientist predicts that the viral mutation known as the UK variant will quickly become the most dominant in the UK and across the globe. The UK variant, which was first detected in England, appears to be more transmissible. It is now responsible for more than half of new infections in Portugal and Denmark, and is expected to do the same in the United States as early as next month. Easier to catch, easier to spread. Is it just as easy to stop it with the vaccines?
Our biggest hope and dream as scientists at the moment is to produce a vaccine like polio or measles. That's two different viruses that you can have once in your lifetime and be protected for your whole life. Where it's going to be the truth of the coronavirus, we don't know, but we're still quite hopeful.
We are always able to produce the vaccine that will deal with any virus mutation, any virus variant.
Well, my first guest tonight is one of the UK's leading scientists in charge of the country's program of monitoring the coronavirus for mutations. Her job is now one of the most important in this pandemic. Professor Sharon Peacock joins me tonight from Cambridge. Professor Peacock, it's good to have you on the program. I'd like to, if I could, get your take on what we just heard from the UK vaccines minister. He said that no matter what the mutation or the variant, we will always be able to answer it with a vaccine. Now, that is quite a statement to make. Is it true?
Rather than answering that directly, good evening, by the way, rather than answer that directly, what I would do is take a step through the kind of near history that we're facing now. So right now, it's really key to recognise that the variant in the UK and that's spreading from the UK is eminently effective against the vaccines that we have right now. So that's the good news, and we mustn't consider that anything else than that is true, because it could put people off having vaccines. So go and have your vaccine because it's fully effective. Now, what we have seen is that viruses can mutate reasonably rapidly, and when they do, that might mean that a variant arises which is then more resistant to the vaccine. At that stage, we have to start to look at how we can modify vaccines so that they change so that they can actually tackle the variant. So I think it's a bit more complicated than has been suggested, but it's going to be a kind of cat and mouse game as we progress to tackle the virus.
Talk to me a little bit about the UK variant. We have heard that it may be more lethal and that it's more transmissible. I mean, what are the facts there?
Yeah. OK, well, the facts are that it is more transmissible. The range of transmissibility goes from between 30% to 70%. So it's probably around 50% more transmissible than other variants that are circulating at the moment. So clearly, yes. In terms of efficacy of vaccine, we believe that the vaccines that we're using in the UK are fully effective at the moment. And in terms of virulence or lethality, the evidence is growing that this particular variant appears to be slightly more virulent than previous strains, perhaps about around 30 or 40%. Now, that in terms of overall numbers is relatively small, but it does appear to be more virulent. And what that means is that more people become seriously ill. But when they go into hospital, there's no difference in the number of people who actually die rather than the number of people that survive.
Now, if it's easier to pass on this variant, do you see it overtaking, I guess, the current strain that you have in the UK? And then what about the rest of the world?
Well, the variant that we have at the moment, it originally detected in Kent, sometimes called the Kent variant, has spread across the entire country in the UK. So it causes around 90% of all disease in the UK. So it's spread widely. Now, when we look at it elsewhere, we can only really detect it in places that have done sequencing or tested for the particular variant that's circulating. And it has spread to 82 other countries. And so what happens when it reaches that country will depend what other variant is there and whether it can be out-competed. It's a bit like kind of running a race, if you like, with another variant to see which one's the fittest. And if it is more transmissible than other variants, then it's likely to spread. And I believe that that's where the predictions have come from other countries, that this could become a dominant strain in their particular country.
I'd like to talk a little bit about your job with the UK sequencing the viral genomes, more viral genomes than any other country in the world. We looked at some numbers. 27,000 genomes are now sequenced in one day. 1 year ago, it was 50,000 in a year. So that's quite an explosion in capacity.
It's absolutely huge, isn't it? So far, we've sequenced around 280,000 genomes, which is about half the world's genomes in the global database. And as you rightly say, a year ago, before the pandemic, Public Health England was producing about 50,000 genomes a year. So we're doing that in about a week and a half. But it's going to get higher, actually, because our aspiration is that we'll be able to sequence a higher proportion of the virus, particularly as the number of cases come down. And at the moment, we're heading upwards of 35,000 and so on. So we're going to keep pushing that boundary to see how far we can get. But it would be a remarkable feat if we could sequence, all of the viruses that are infecting people in the UK.
Professor Peacock, when the variants became a news story, there were 2 points that really stuck with us, that the UK leads the world in sequencing pathogen genomes. And the second point is that the United States was hardly doing it at all. Were you surprised to learn that? I mean, we were surprised.
Well, I wasn't surprised that the UK was ahead of the game, because we started thinking about it back in March when there were only 80 or so cases in the country. And I think we have a long history of pathogen genomics, so we were already thinking about the value of sequencing for public health. And so we were in some ways prepared or primed. It was in our thoughts that we could do this. So I'm not surprised that we were ready when we really needed it. I think that in the US, they certainly have the machines, capability, the expertise. And I'm looking forward to see how they scale up their sequencing. I believe there's a lot of discussion going on, and I look forward to them contributing genomes from the US, which is going to be a very important population to better understand.
I'd like for you to take a listen to what immunology professor Danny Altman said at Imperial College last week. Take a listen.
I think with the news getting somewhat scarier with the variants, we've all just got to really raise our game. The game is still the same one, but we've got to get more people vaccinated. They've got to be more stringent in how they adhere to lockdown. And we've just got to take it all even more seriously if that's possible.
So is he saying we're in a race against the virus and against the clock, that the only way to stop this pandemic is to vaccinate so many people that we get ahead of the virus? Is that the right way of thinking?
I'd like to think that we'd want to do that no matter what variants are circulating. And so I would want to vaccinate as many people as possible, drive down the number of cases through a combination of vaccination and the usual hands, face and space, and following the rules. So it's incumbent on us to do that whatever variant is circulating. As variants arise that could reduce the efficacy of vaccination, then that's going to become more challenging. But I do believe that vaccine developers will overcome that and are already looking at vaccines that will overcome that. But clearly, the sooner that we can get on top of this particular virus, the better.
Yeah, we know the UK, the United States, along with Israel, lead the world in vaccinations in this pandemic. The European Union is under lots of pressure for the slow rollout. How worried should we be here in the EU?
Well, this is a global pandemic, and people say no one's safe until everyone's safe. I would be particularly concerned that there's equitable vaccine rollout across the world and not just EU. And so everybody needs to vaccinate their populations as soon as possible. Ultimately, the EU will be able to roll out vaccines because there is the capability to fund that. But what concerns me more is that there are some countries that are behind the curve in their vaccine program, for other reasons. And so I'm keen that those countries get a clear support as necessary.
And before we wrap up, Professor Peacock, let me ask you if you could look into your crystal ball, when do you see this pandemic ending, and do you see it ending this year?
I think it would be difficult to say that it will end on a particular date. That's a really tough question that you've asked me there. And I don't see that there's going to be a difference between one day and the next. It's going to be a gradual process of getting the pandemic under control. It could be that we have bad winters and better summers like we do with flu. So I think over time we're going to be continuing to see the virus causing some issues in the human population. But I think it's going to be a gradual reduction and getting it under control as we grow to live with the virus as we would influenza, rather than a day at which everything changes.
Professor Sharon Peacock with the University of Cambridge. Professor Peacock, we appreciate your time and your insights and all that you do to help all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, of course, all the hopes being pinned on vaccines depend on getting enough people immunized to reach herd immunity. But what if people refuse to be vaccinated? That is a question people are posing in Belgium. Public health officials there say they are noticing that in the French-speaking part of the country, resistance to the vaccine is higher, even among healthcare workers who are threatened with an infection every day.
This is a moment to remember. A colleague photographs care home worker Cristina Rodriguez as she receives her second dose of the BioNTech Pfizer vaccine.
I really hope to encourage my colleagues, but also my family, even the country, to come and get vaccinated.
As vaccination drives in nursing homes like this one in the French-speaking part of Belgium draw to a close, many staff are still opting out. Almost half of all care workers in private institutions alone in the region are hesitating. Even the director of this home is among them.
What are the side effects, let's say in 20 years? Nobody knows today. So it's a bit like buying a car. You feel like you could be safe, but I want to see the crash test results. So personally, I am a bit skeptical. But for the older people, clearly, it's a good thing.
This caregiver is also unsure. He prefers to wait because he's heard some rumors.
I heard there are some products in it that can be used to, people can be observed from distance because of those products in them, like espionage kind of stuff, you know.
And this is just the tip of the iceberg. False claims that the vaccine causes infertility or even death are spreading like wildfire across social media. The French-speaking part of Belgium appears particularly receptive to these ideas. The head of Nursing Home Federation, Firmabel, thinks making vaccinations mandatory may be the only option. So far, training sessions or online campaigns have failed to convince staff.
I did not understand. I do not understand. It was so hard for them. They saw a lot of elderly people who died. They saw the loss of life. And it's unbelievable how those people do not understand that they can protect themselves. It's a big question.
Experts say part of the answer is that the anti-vaccine movement can spread fear faster than mainstream media can spread information.
So all these beliefs will make you hesitant or make you even reluctant to take the vaccine, but it doesn't mean you endorse a conspiracy theory. And so when you stigmatize people like that by saying, oh, you are an anti-vaccine, it actually will have the negative effect of ostracizing them and putting them in the hands of these movements.
Vas-y, viens un peu mou mou mou. Mou mou mou. Voilà, tchac.
Back at the nursing home, this local doctor is trying his utmost to demonstrate that vaccines are safe.
And that's why I tell the staff here, you need to get vaccinated. Not 70% of you, but 100% of you. All of you, in order to win this fight.
Many of Cristina Rodriguez's colleagues are also taking to social media to encourage others. She hopes each photo will make a difference.